Hello, welcome to Quackalope. Thank you for being here. Today I'm bringing you a Kickstarter preview of Havoc from Nick's Games. Now, Havoc is a deck crafting, lane battling, skirmish to the death style game. This is a combat, head-to-head, 2-player or 4-player fight to the brutal end, then rebuild your deck and re-explore and journey back on this, on this mission to conquer the land, to equip the most powerful and ferocious troops possible, and hopefully keep your general alive while annihilating your opponents. In this preview video, I'm going to give you a quick overview of how it plays, some of the nuanced elements that make the strategic decisions that you're choosing to do here in Havoc stand out compared to some of the other games that I've played in this genre, and talk to you about what both myself and my wife, Shira, have enjoyed. Now, with that in mind, I do have to acknowledge that this is a sponsored preview video, meaning that they reached out to us and wanted us to cover their game, to highlight the Kickstarter and let you know that there's a link in the top of the video description that you can follow to go get more information and, of course, back this, support this publisher, and hopefully unlock more cool things for us to play with, which is always a neat and good incentive. But we enjoyed this game so much, we went ahead and produced 2 full gameplay videos with our own unique crafted decks. Now, many of the scenarios that we played before filming, we played with the actual custom, pre-built, comes in the rulebook style decks that are supposed to be fairly balanced and give you a good starting ground, a good way to progress through. But this prototype came with an arsenal of cards, factions, abilities, leaders, and generals that we hadn't ever explored. So we just got done sitting down and playing through and really, really struggling in some situations to overcome the vicious and brutal decks that Shira built. So watch those gameplays, take a look to see exactly how the game functions, and yeah, that's kind of the framework. All right, let's talk about Havoc. Let's talk about 2 or 3 of the areas that stand out when I'm thinking about why you might be interested in this, and then I'll give you a bigger overview of what the game actually is and how it operates. So some of the areas for me that stand out when thinking about the decisions that have gone into the design elements of Havoc have to do with how thematic and lore-driven it is. Now, I'm very much a story-first player, so I won't bore you too much on this, but all of the thematic, all of the experiential, all of the beautiful artwork and decisions that you're making in the game, they line up in the ecosystem of this world that we've been playing. You see, we have the Nyx here, which is this giant system, this planet, this region of uncontested land that's inhabited by a mechanic and biological fused organism. A deity, a god, had once left this area for their own devices, leaving the laws and the rules of creation in play, and from that, these abominations, these twisted scraps of flesh and metal started to appear and become created. We are generals. We are starships that have come to this planet to conquer it, to take it over. We've been drawn here from a mysterious force. Some would say the power of the robot, the power of the computer, the hive mind itself has brought us forth in order to have little beings with which to toil and play. But we're going to be activating and triggering reactors. Those reactors are then going to be sequencing with the cards we have in our deck, some of which are generic gray cards, which give us standard abilities, but some of which are bright, vibrant, and highly thematic reactor-based cards. Like the crystal reactor would open up the opportunity for us to play our crystal cards from our hand, whether that's tech, traps, or unique combatants that we can pull out onto the deck. So, we're going to be triggering global events that affect both players collectively. We're then going to be maneuvering through a series of turns, getting more and more powerful with every consecutive turn, till we finally summon our pilot or some of our more powerful cards and creatures and rain havoc down on our opponent until we only have one person left standing, the general that has theoretically conquered all of the land. Thematically, this game is extremely rich. When you build your deck of cards, you're going to be building it from a number of different generals, a number of different mechs that you have at your disposal. You also have your region or your world, the faction that you pledge allegiance to, who you're actually fighting for. You have all of these various different reactor-based and thematic-driven cards that encompass your combatants, which are going to be the warriors actually on the ground, artifacts that are going to live on the table that give you some type of permanent bonus, tech that oftentimes is going to be played out and then have an immediate impact on the table, traps, which are going to potentially secure or enable other players from maneuvering or positioning themselves in a more advantageous zone, and finally you're going to have your entire deck, well, a mixed selection of your weapons that you can equip to your mech depending on which one you've taken, or some of your robots depending on what faction you're playing as, and these just open up more doors for you to rain havoc on your players. This game has a lot of little card decisions when you're building and crafting and establishing the cards that you want to play with. And all of them, for me, tie back into those thematic roots, that story that we're telling, this globalized or unglobalized population, this sentient biomechanical world where we're descending on and hoping to not only survive, but conquer. It really sings. And there's piles and piles of flavor text that we read on the gameplay video, but I'm not going to read right now because some of you want to get down to exactly how the game plays. So, the game is going to follow a series of turns. On those turns, you're going to be doing the following actions. You're going to draw up one card. You're then going to be able to play depending on the amount of resource you have. So in turn 1, you'll have 1. In turn 2, you'll have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on and so forth. At turn 8, you'll be able to summon your mech, assuming all the reactors haven't already been played out. And at turn 10, you'll be able to cut your resource in half in order to draw some additional cards. Now, the cards that you have, like I just said, are going to be combatants, they're going to be tech, but they're all going to follow a similar principle. Here in the top, you can see how many resources it takes to play, so this one takes 10. This is very specifically a microbial combatant, which means I will need the microbial reactor initiated or still on the board in order for this card to be played, whereas this one here is just a general droid combatant, which can be played at any point, even early on in round 3. You have your movement, you have your range on both these cards. We have our attack, which is the top number, and our defense or our health, which is the bottom number. And then finally, all these cards have a little bit of text that talk about the unique advantages or abilities that they have. But one thing I've really enjoyed about this so far has been I haven't had to go back and search through a lot of the keywords or the key terms. We even had them next to us for all these gameplays with the intention of looking up things if we needed to, because we want to get things as accurately as possible. And the cards so far have either established ideas that are easily repeatable, or they have the text necessary to clarify what the card does and how it operates on the table whenever you're playing it. So from the point we were running from our actual custom constructed deck, we not only knew the cards that we might have an opportunity to draw, but they were easy enough to follow along. So, turn 1. Drawing a card into my hand. I have however many resources I have, depending on what round of the game it is, and then I'll play those out. I have a playment zone, and my opponent has a playment zone. These 2 squares in the middle. We have the Nyx here in the center, which is more of the uncontested regional zone. This also has a status effect or bonuses depending on the cards that you've played or the architecture or permanent tech you've put out. Depending on what you've initiated, the Nyx is the zone that's most likely to be affected by other card abilities and other card mechanics, like the Explore ability, which allows me, if I move a scout into the Nyx, to go ahead and find and pull a reactor card from my deck. So I'll spend whatever resources I have to play cards out into the tableau or into the battlefield, and then I'll be able to do move and attack, depending on what cards I have out here. I can shift forward, I can shift adjacent, I can shift diagonal, I can attack based on rows and not based on movement distance. This is a key part of this. Positioning here is a big element of the game, but it's not a skirmish game in the fact that we are always face-to-face fighting. Every region or every zone, every row here is considered one away. So even if I was here with a range of 2, I could hit everything here and everything here. Adjacency comes into play when it deals with blocking and keeping people from pushing forward. When it deals with some of the very specific cards that we have that maybe create defensive shields around players that are immediately behind them. And adjacency comes in play not for targeting and attacking, but instead for retaliation. If you're able to position yourself right next to another player, you're going to be able to retaliate if they've done a melee attack against you. They punch you in the face, you get to punch them in the face, even if you're destroying them. So there's a lot of adjustment. There's a lot of positioning, there's a lot of movement, but it's not the typical skirmish movement that you'd usually encounter. After I've done all of my movement, after I've done all of my positioning, I might have some end-of-turn effects, like if I was poisoned or if I was slowly corroding. I would have a debuff to my stats, losing a little bit of attack, losing a little bit of health, and then I pass to my opponent, the other player. That'll continue on until, well, a general has been annihilated. Like I said, at round 8, you're able to bring your general out into the tableau. However, if all 6 reactors get played before round 8, either both players playing 3, meaning by round 3 they could be here, or one player plays 4, the other player plays 2, so on and so forth, you're then able to summon your mech early. However, if the numbers aren't tied, meaning if both players didn't play 3 each, whoever played the most gets to summon their mech. The other player has to wait until it crosses that 8 threshold. This is extremely important and sometimes leads to what the publishers or the designers have termed a reactor race. A scramble to try to get access to all the reactors necessary so you can summon your mech as quickly as possible and hopefully not be at a disadvantage for a couple turns. Havoc plays quick. It's accessible, and every time I've sat down and experienced it, I've wanted to go re-explore, rebuild or reinvigorate my deck and dive back into it again. And I'm still only playing with a 40 deck hand, or a 40 card deck, meaning my hand and the options that I have to draw are still a little bit debuffed and a little bit limited compared to the full, more aggressive tactical version of this game. That scales up to 60 cards in your deck, with some of them having the opportunity to be duplicates, and the game extends just a little bit longer because you're a little bit less likely to throw yourself into a vulnerable position quite as quickly. So that's the core premise. That's how the game operates. That's the flow and the puzzle that you're trying to solve. Some other things that stand out to me when it comes to this is it doesn't feel quite like a skirmish game, in my opinion, but it also doesn't feel like a lane battling, card-based game. There is that interesting hybrid. I mean, when I've played things like Magic the Gathering, when I've played things like Pokemon, or I'm specifically thinking of Keyforge, I always feel like those are lane adjacent or lane battling games, or just straight card games, head-to-head skirmishes to rip the opponent's health down to the bare minimum. Here, movement is required, positioning is required, the distance that you can attack, the range that you have is necessary in order to accomplish your objective. And yet at the same time, they've kept it focused on the card play, the unique abilities that you have, the fact that no card is ever entirely safe, and the fact that you're going to be drawing and really managing your hand, both in the early turns to see what you can get out as efficiently and as quickly as possible, but also in the late turns to determine when and how you play some of your more powerful cards, and when you take the most advantage of them, knowing that your opponent might be able to yeet them off the board in a few turns, if not less than that. This game comes down to a lot of strategic deck building or deck crafting and construction, very, very purposeful and strategic card play, and yet there is that veneer, there is that oversight of it having a little bit of that skirmish element mixed in. If it seems like a game that might be up your alley, if these two genres of games, whether it's a tactical skirmish miniature-based game or a card-driven head-to-head lane battler, if those two genres are genres that you've enjoyed in the past, I think Havoc is doing something very unique, very deep, and very interesting. I do think you're going to get the most out of Havoc if you happen to be the type of player that enjoys crafting your own deck. The pre-constructed decks were fun, but I was learning a lot of the cards while I was exploring them, and like other pre-constructed deck games that I've played in the past, specifically thinking of you, Marvel Champions, I have the most fun not when I'm running the system that the publisher has handed me, but instead going head-to-head against a player or a character who has designed their own custom set. And I'm trying to manage everything I've created for the sake of overcoming and ripping down everything that they've created. I like knowing all the cards and having made all the little nuanced decisions between when and where I cut corners, how expensive my deck is to actually play and get out onto the table, how much movement do I have versus artifacts that give me specific bonuses and buffs. I mean, in the deck that I created, I had one strategic, purposeful objective. I designed it around getting my pilot out early because they can leave their mech and jump onto the table, and mowing through Shira's lines. That was my hope. I had a lot of stuff that could buff me, give me strength, allow me to really be aggressive, and give me movement that'll allow my pilot who couldn't usually move very effectively, to maneuver across the board and then get back to his mech when it was time for us both to summon ours out, with the hope that I would have already done some preliminary damage before that happened. I instead jumped out onto the board, got completely enveloped in a cloud of toxic gas that Shira played down, one of those little tech cards that she was able to summon from the spire over here. Which spire is this? Specifically from the fossil reactor. And I ended up coughing up a fit, losing all of my ability to do any damage, and jumping back into my mech as soon as possible, because I was literally falling apart and dying. My plan didn't work well, but I still had fun building it, and I had fun trying it out, and I think theoretically it's possible if the other player hasn't planned to poison your troops across the battlefield. I don't think she's heard about the fact that, like, gas-based warfare, chemical warfare is not something that's allowed in the Geneva Convention anymore. We're definitely going to have to file a complaint with the Galactic Empire and see if we can get her licensee for Starship, cruisers revoked. But we're going to be filing that in the court system, and in the actual game, I did suffer some cataclysmic damage very quickly. My pilot has never been the same since his lungs were filled with a toxic gas that he has yet to be able to identify. I'd like to make that clear. We don't know the source. It seems alien in technology, and I feel like I've went off on a rant that has left some of you very confused. But that's part of the charm of Havoc, right? Like, the story that it tells, the adventures that you go on, the fact that this has movement and scale and a landscape we're playing in means that those stories come through all the more richer. It means that the experience of playing, the game that we're journeying through, has that extra layer, that nuanced depth of, well, exactly what happened having happened. So, it's a quick breakdown, quick overview of Havoc. We've had a good time with it. We've enjoyed diving in. I'm excited to see what they actually produce with this Kickstarter as they raise and hopefully unlock as many, bonuses, stretch goals. I haven't looked at the page yet because it's not live in public. My assumption is there's going to be some cool things that they're hoping to unveil and hoping to hit thresholds so they can add more to this game, and I very much want to see that happen. This prototype is good enough that I could sit down and rerun and will likely still give it another swing before the actual final copy arrives. Now, remember, if you're not into deck crafting, you're not into lane battling, you're not into backing Kickstarters as a whole, then Havoc might not change your mind. But if it seems like the right game for the genre that you play, I'd really encourage you to swing over, check out the Kickstarter page, give it a closer look, talk with the publishers, talk with the designers and the artists and all the effort that's been put into this title, and decide if they're worth your support. Games like this don't get created without backers like you lending your voice, your critique when it comes to playtesting and prototyping, and, of course, your support over, the duration of the Kickstarter campaign, in the comment section and over on BGG. Let them know what you think. Let them know what you're excited about and what else you'd like to see featured in Havoc, and I am sure they will be receptive and they will listen. Okay? Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Whatever the case, though, whatever you do, remember to do the important thing. Go outside with a gas mask. If you're going to be, listen, if you're going to be going into a combat zone where you have alien life forms that you've never encountered before, and you're likely going to be attacked with chemical warfare that you've never experienced before, I'd highly encourage a gas mask. So at least the corrosion will take a bit of time to seep through the vinyl wrapping that you have, and then eventually get to your lungs. I'm still bitter about it. I'll be honest about that. I'm man enough to admit that my 39-week pregnant wife annihilated me at a game by using what I would consider unfair tactics. I'll put that out there. I'll lay that on the ground. You take it however you'd like. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.